Welcome to Fitness and Consciousness. I'm your host, Ryan Hadley, and my guest today is Erin Perrazzelli. She's a yoga teacher. She learned in India. She's an old friend of mine who today's actually the first day we've seen each other in about 20 years. So she's on today to give her story and talk about yoga. So thanks for being on the show, Erin.
I'm so glad to be here.
So how did you get into yoga? What took you to India? What is that whole story? How did that all unfold?
Oh, okay. Well, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I had a good friend whose mom was a hippie, and she took me to my first yoga class. And I remember how intrigued I was, when they turned off all the lights and they had us do Savasana. And that always stuck with me. But then I stopped doing yoga for many, many years after that and didn't pick it up again until we had a yoga teacher come into the office where I worked. So at that point I remembered how much I loved it. But I still only took it about once a week. And then after my son was born, I happened to live across the street from a yoga studio, and I started going every single day and became more and more attracted to it, and realizing how good my mind felt after a class. We had an incredible teacher there named Joan Miller who had a method of getting people to talk during class while they were doing yoga. She always had a question to ask during each class, and she would have us hold a difficult pose, and we'd forget how difficult the pose was because we were answering her question, and it was really exciting. So to get to how I got to India, I moved from New York to Knightstown, Indiana, and when I came here, all I knew for sure was that I didn't want to commute. So I was thinking, what does Knightstown need? And it had a yoga teacher right before I moved here who had a great following, but she had to leave and go to Florida. So I thought I would become Knightstown's yoga teacher, and I got really excited about it. And I was so excited I wanted to get into it right away. So I was looking into yoga teacher programs, and most of them last anywhere from half a year to a whole year, or at least 3 months. But the ones in India are concentrated into a few weeks, generally 4 weeks to get your 200-hour training. But me having a young child at home, I needed it to be even shorter than that. So I found a place that would let me go for 3 weeks and then let me do the last week on my own. And it was in India.
Yeah. What style was it? Like, what town did you go to in India? How did you find out about the place?
I think I found out about it just by Googling yoga schools. There might be a site that collects all the different yoga teacher training programs. The city is Rishikesh, and there are probably hundreds of yoga schools there.
Yeah, that's a famous town, right?
Yeah. The Beatles stayed in an ashram there and recorded the White Album there, and we got to visit that ashram. It was amazing.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's untouched from the 60s. It hasn't been, it's owned by the government now, and I guess they can't afford to turn it into anything else. So it looks like it's been abandoned from the day that the Beatles and their guru left it. It's covered with these little meditation domes, just made out of rocks, and they're meant for one person, and you go inside and it's very cool and dark, and there are hundreds of them. And then some of them are connected together by walkways. It was fascinating. It was just really, really neat to see it. And it doesn't even they don't take a ticket for you to go into it or anything like that. It's just, there's one guard standing in front of these acres and acres and acres of property. And you just kind of trespass onto it. If he gives you the secret handshake and you can go, then you go. And it was fascinating.
Yeah, I bet a friend of mine went there, and she said that it was like the guy who lets you in is just knows how to pick the lock, kind of a thing. It's it wasn't like this. She thought she was going to the Beatles ashram. It has to be this big famous place. It's going to have a lot of people. Yeah. And it was just like, oh, I know how to get in there. And then she made it seem like it was just not what you would expect from, you would have like this major thing in your mind, but...
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. If it was in America, it would have been Disneyland by now, but it was there. And it's very wild. It's covered with vines and graffiti too. It was a really nice place to do a little yoga. Yeah.
What style of yoga?
Oh, we learned all the styles, mostly Hatha. But, there are several types of yoga. Ashtanga, Hatha, Kriya, Kundalini, Tantra, Bikram, Iyengar. It's crazy. I was getting confused because I didn't understand sometimes things got lost in translation. We were learning a lot of information very quickly. Some of the things you learn are very complex, almost on a medical level, in terms of like the definitions you need to know and the terms. So it was pretty intense. But yeah, we were able to take an Ashtanga class, and that's 8 limbs yoga. You know about that, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one is very specific, has a set of poses that you have to go through. And then we also took a Hatha class, and we learned a lot about adjustments in that. And we had a Kundalini class in which I held my arms up for 14 minutes and felt like they were going to fall off at the end of it.
What were your thoughts on the Kundalini class? Because I've done some myself, and some of it was like, I think this is just a trick or something, like somebody's just playing a joke. That, like, what about like holding your arms up for so long? What does that really have to do with Kundalini? Or you just like what was your opinion of it, or your experience of it? Did it like prove the method? I'm not saying I don't believe in it or anything like that, but I was just kind of like wondering if that style, what they call Kundalini yoga, like the Yogi Bhajan stuff, is really any better than the other yogas, because it seemed like it all has to do with Kundalini. Or like, what was your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, our teachers let us know that all the types of yoga have the same philosophy. And the only one that they don't like is Bikram, because they think hot yoga is bad for you. But Kundalini is discussed in yoga philosophy. Our yoga philosophy class went in depth into what Kundalini is, how to access it, how to control it or let it rise up in you, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the philosophical framework of it, taught by someone who thinks you could achieve that even through Hatha yoga. So actual Kundalini yoga, where everyone wears white and focuses on specific types of poses, I don't know all that much about it, but I do know that I think Kundalini energy is real. And part of why is because of a note that I have written down here. When the Kundalini comes up, you will not be able to handle it yet. Your mind is still a little impure, so it will give you manic energy. It will give you crazy amounts of energy and misdirected sexual desire, and the only remedy will be to sit in water. If Kundalini awakens when your mind is pure, you will be filled with love. So I like the description of it because I'm an artist, and I've had periods in my life that were flights of fancy. Like I've gotten to points where I'm so excited about the things that I'm learning or that I'm doing that my mind is flying. And I never had a definition for that until I heard about Kundalini. And I think that what really made sense to me was that being in that state of mind is wonderful, but not sustainable. So what they're talking about is that the fact that the Kundalini came up, but if you were not yet able to handle it, it would be a wild thing. It would be a roller coaster ride that would go up and come down. So if you, through yoga practices, start to understand your inner power and your deep energy at the source of your very core, and you can harness that, not let it escape in manic ways, but actually hold it in somewhat through some of the poses you've learned in yoga, you will reach a higher state. Though it makes sense to me just because of psychological experiences I've had.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things where, like, you can't really prove it to anybody, but you can prove it to yourself, through these different ways. And I had an experience where I met someone while I used to drive a cab, and I met someone, and I think she might have been an angel or maybe a bodhisattva, which is like a Buddha that decided to come back to Earth realm to help other people achieve Buddhahood. But she was something else. But her Earth story, as I put it, which sounds more weird to me than what I just said, was like she was from India, and she was in an arranged marriage. And I would take her to work, and I would take her home from work. And a lot of times we would talk for 20 minutes. After I'd take her to her apartment, talk for 20 minutes. And she was she was just perfect. We would immediately start talking about spiritual things. And it was like she knew everything without it being I know everything. It was just all real easy, and it's kind of hard to explain, but there was a time, I was also reading at the time a lot about Qigong, and I was taking Qigong classes and practicing on my own. And I kept reading in these different books where if you want to get to these highest levels, you have to quit drinking, you can't smoke weed, you can't do anything, nothing. And if you want to achieve those you can get pretty good and still do that stuff. But if you want to get to the highest levels, you just can't. And so I knew that she didn't drink or do anything, and she knew that I did, I guess, and she never told me to quit drinking. She never told me anything like that, but we would always just talk about these higher things. And I saw her 5 days a week, once or twice a day for a couple months at least. And then I saw she was walking back up to her apartment one time, and it was I saw my potential or something. If you could, it's really hard to explain, but it was I realized that to get what I want, I have to be a magnet for what I want to attract. Mm-hmm. And what I want to attract doesn't want somebody that drinks, smokes weed, stuff like that. And so, it was she just turned the dial without saying anything, never preaching or anything. And so I went home and I had my last beer, and this was almost 6 years ago now.
Oh my gosh.
I drank my last beer and I smoked my last half of a joint, and I usually wouldn't even admit to people that I would even smoke. There were times a long time ago, yeah, everybody knew.
Ryan, long hair in high school, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. But there was a long time when I wouldn't admit it, and I would only tell certain people. But anyways, I realized she just turned this dial in me, and I quit everything that day. And I woke up the next morning. I didn't even finish my beer, and I knocked my beer over when I woke up in the morning, and the smell was like, I mean, a spilled beer is not going to ever smell good, but it smelled like 1,000 rotten, nasty beers. It was so disgusting. I couldn't imagine why anybody would want to drink that stuff. And that was it. And that was the last time, and that was July 3rd, going on almost 6 years ago. And that was also the last time I ever saw her.
Oh.
She never called me again.
Oh my God.
It was like and after that time, like I couldn't eat, and I went vegan shortly after. I was vegetarian since high school, but at that time, getting around to the point of this was I couldn't eat anything, and my energy just started going crazy. I was usually pretty quiet and didn't talk a lot. But people would get in the cab, and I was just like blah 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 blah, just rattling off. I couldn't stop talking. I was super hyper, and I'm always just a mellow dude, and I couldn't.
Kundalini was coming up, right?
Yeah, and I couldn't eat, and I was drinking lots. I was drinking like 4 32-ounce bottles of kefir per day, and I would eat nothing. And then like about 6 days later, or something like that, I went to the movie theater with my son, and I ate like a few pieces of popcorn, literally just a few. And that was the first time I'd eaten since then. And that was all I ate for that day, and slowly started eating again, and my energy kind of like leveled off a little bit. But it was just crazy. And then right after that, I became vegan again. But it was like this energy is like, man, what was that? And
did she also start you on your path of fitness? Or were you already...
No, I was already doing that. One of my first jobs after high school was a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. So by 1999, I was, I think I just turned 20 years old. I was a personal trainer. But she kind of got me, she was just able to like turn that dial in me. And it was kind of like, it reminded me of the show Touched by an Angel, where like these angels just come into town. Have you ever seen that? You know what I'm talking about? Mm-mm. But it's a show that's like these angels, and they basically just pop into town because somebody needs some kind of change in their life. They make the change, and then they're out.
Wow.
So they don't like stick around in the same town because they already made the change. They're off to the next one. So that's what it was like for me. So the Kundalini stuff makes perfect sense to me, and I won't keep rattling on about that anymore. But it's like you can tell people that, but it's like until that kind of thing happens, or like when you're talking about like these artistic frames of mind where you finally had the vocabulary to express what you're talking about. I finally had a term for
yes.
it. Is that what you're...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, and to know that it wasn't energy that has to go to waste, or that has to be frightening or unsustainable. It can actually be used. But and also the drug thing, the drug and alcohol that you mentioned, I had an interesting experience. After doing yoga all day, every day for 3 weeks and eating vegetarian, I felt so strong and healthy. And in Rishikesh, it's a dry town, and it's also purely vegetarian. And we were in a coffee shop, and there was this big sign that said "Say no to drugs," and I thought, yeah, no kidding, you don't need them at all. I mean, the whole town the hippies took their aesthetic from India, so I don't want to say it was hippie because it was India, but it looked through my eyes, hippie-ish, like all the colors, all the flowers, all the way things were decorated, and you almost felt elevated in a way that was so special that you would never even consider wanting a drug. And that was the vibe of the town. And I had a friend in India who was my college friend. And he and I used to drink together in college, of course. And he was going to meet up with me at the end of my yoga training. So he called and he's like, "Erin, what should I bring? The vodka? The whiskey? Are you excited?" And I was like, Dheeraj, there is no way I can have even a sip of alcohol. Like, it is the last thing on my mind. It was just a great feeling.
Well, did that last? You drink it all now?
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about this India situation. It's been hard for me to carry that culture into American culture. I'd hoped that I would, and I thought that I would, but I become very affected by the culture that I'm actually living in and become reabsorbed back into it. So my husband is Italian. My mother-in-law is one of the best cooks you will ever meet in your life. Italian cuisine is all about experiencing all that the earth has to offer, including lots of meat. Cuisine for a yogi is very simple and absolutely vegetarian. I've fallen back into the culture that I'm a part of here, the Italian American, the American, and the drinking. Italians actually don't drink, but drinking happens for me at campouts, at campfires, at art openings. So I did fall back into it, but if I really want to study how to truly awaken, it would have to fall to the wayside.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I'm this vegan guy, but the main place I teach is a wilderness survival school, and there's skulls and animal skins, and the owner is really into hunting. Most people that go there are, but it's like that's respect too. So it's not like he's a mean guy or anything, or it's not like he's not this conscious guy or spiritual guy. To me, he's all that. The owner, Matt Shaw, he's really legitimate wilderness survival expert, passed down from his grandfather who lived in India for 20 years and as a shikiri. So part of his job from the government was to track and kill the man-eating cats. So there'd be and anyways, but it's like, so I go there and it might look like it's the opposite of me, but it's not. It's kind of this weird thing, and I think that, just because somebody has a little bit to drink sometimes, that I don't think that means they're less spiritual than me, or if they smoke weed to have, whether it's for like what they call a spiritual reason, or whether it's because they think it's fun to smoke a little weed. I don't really think that they're like not as enlightened as me or anything like that. So it's interesting that you kind of say that too. Like, for me, it's not, but I'm not going to tell somebody else like what their experience is. But for me, it's like I can't drink, I can't smoke. There's none of that. It has to be this way. But maybe that's because I used to do it a lot, and so now I can't do it at all. Where somebody else is like, yeah, I have like.
Yeah, someone else is moderate about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you think for yourself.
Well, it's like Yogananda said to someone who was interested in following him, but was like a very, worldly, regular dude, and he said to him, "Do you smoke?" And the guy said, "Yep." And Yogananda said, "That's okay." And he said, "Do you drink?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's okay." And he said, "Do you eat meat?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's okay. You won't want to once you study with me." Or no, you have to be okay with the idea that you might want to stop doing those things when you study with me. Yeah. So I would say about that, with learning in India, the focus on the body and the intensity of what we learned about digestion and breathing. Vegetarianism is a pretty central component of taking yoga seriously because of the the way your body digests. Not just because of the moral issues, although don't kill is definitely a tenet, a yoga principle. But I also am not judging anyone. I eat meat right now, and I feel that I know a lot about yoga. I'm sure my students do. It's not like that. It's just there's different levels to it. And if you wanted to become a person who was going to meditate in a cave for 10 years and live off of the drops of water from leaves, if you wanted to take yoga to that level, to the highest level of consciousness, then you would absolutely be vegetarian. In fact, you wouldn't be eating at all, which is one of the interesting miracles that happens. And the thing about these sort of these yogic miracles that you read a lot about that seem so far out to the Western mind and to Western culture, they are far out. But India has a less literal culture than we do, and it's much older and probably wiser. And wiser in terms of very deep spirituality. And you can believe in miracles when you're walking around India because, like the miracle of the woman you met in the cab. So you can be open to it in America, but in India, it's amazing how you start to believe in all of that, especially if you're practicing yoga for so long every day that you notice yourself wanting to eat less and wanting to drink less. You could see that it's not a leap that if a person practiced all day, every day for years, that they might actually be able to do some of those things you hear about, such as live off of nectar that drips down the back of their throat from their third eye, or live off of water from leaves. I love the idea that we could just imagine that these miracles are out there because it makes life so exciting and so mysterious.
Yeah, I think it's worth, and it's like if people don't want to believe it, or I had a couple yoga teachers on a couple weeks ago, and I think it was Audrey McCann that said, it was either her or Lisa Dartrey, but she was talking about yoga as the a gateway drug. At first people might start it to get more flexible or something like that for this very concrete sort of reason, very Western. And then they learn a little bit more. What are these mantras about? These are kind of nice to listen to. Oh, these actually mean something. It's actually each one of them has this big profound meaning that you can write a whole book about. And so these miracles that it's if you're just kind of open to it and you just follow the practice, whatever way suits you, you're gonna see these next levels, maybe whether you like it or not. I think you'll get these, can you explain the situation with who I met in the cab differently? Maybe it could have been just a big coincidence, but it doesn't seem like it because it was too profound. It was one of the most significant people that I've ever met, and she just turned the dial in me that affects I might not be doing what I'm doing right now at this moment if it wasn't for her. So it's these little things. You what kind of other little miracles have you had yourself? Whether you're in India or these other experiences that outside of the normal person's daily life.
Well, for me, it's usually getting very absorbed into a painting. That's my highest state. That's my meditation, which is also one of the things we learned about this yoga asanas. The poses are only meant to prepare your body for meditation, and meditation is the ultimate goal of yoga. So, I mean, I've had a lot of weird, otherworldly experiences, but I can't think about them right now.
Well, I mean, just in the paintings, I can see, like, looking around at what you did at the paintings that you have up, and they are very interesting and showed that, like, this, like, one of the things that kind of got me into yoga at the first place was I was at a Grateful Dead concert when I was 15, and I got my first 2 yoga books, and they were like Krishna consciousness yoga books. And so it wasn't really about the poses and stuff. It was more like karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and like the paintings in there. And it was just like they were like so detailed, and they're like so profound that it was like you can't have art like that without there being some kind of higher spirituality. There's just, you can't really have one without the other. Not that spiritual art has to look any particular way, but it totally makes sense to me. I'm not an artist, but when I'm looking at different things, it's like these paintings that you have on the wall now, which of course people can't see, but it's like there's a lot going on here that maybe words don't even have the right way of explaining. Like, it just shows that there's these other levels of consciousness or states of consciousness that are come out in just a picture, because you wouldn't be able to write a story about it or something. So like, what does your yoga look like now? You're teaching where are you teaching, and like, what do your classes look like?
I'm teaching at a wellness center in Knightstown that focuses on cranial sacral therapy. I teach chair yoga there, and I also teach to seniors at a senior center in Newcastle. I teach 80 and 90-year-olds. That's really rewarding. And yeah, in Knightstown I do chair yoga, and I just take it slow and easy. It's funny because, like, I'm so glad you asked me to do this podcast, because it made me get back into all my notebooks, the notes I took in India, all the books we read there. I had that knowledge had been like a little dormant in me. I wasn't quite using it in my yoga classes right now, because I don't want to. It's so much information, I don't want to overwhelm people. So I just teach, very, very simple stretches, and let them do a really nice meditation at the end. But so sorry, my son just walked in. I was going to say, people in India consider Jesus a very important figure. A lot of the ashrams have statues of Jesus. I'm here in Knightstown. People are very religious. The community of the town is centered around churches. Most people that I've met have a deep faith, and I admire that, and I love that, and I understand that they're getting a lot of peace from that. I kind of wish I had been raised in some kind of religious tradition, but I just wasn't at all. Not being raised in any religious tradition, my grandparents were agnostic. My parents, I'm not really sure. They never told me what they think. And so I'm open. I was ripe for the taking with Hinduism, and I just jumped right into it because it made the most sense to me because it's almost like an umbrella religion. Yogananda, for example, the yogi who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, he started a center called the Church of All Religions, and he kept all of them together in that way, and he called Jesus a yogi. So the point that I was saying is, I did bring that up in class once here. I said, Jesus was a yogi, and his resurrection was actually a yoga move, because he was a very advanced yogi and able to go in and out of his body. And they didn't really like that story, so that's why I kind of pulled back from the overly Indian stuff there.
Yeah,
but
not ready for that one.
Yeah. But yeah, I enjoy the philosophy of Hinduism also for the emphasis on reincarnation, because it allows you to really relax and not take things too seriously. If you think that you have more lives coming, why would you worry so much? Whereas the religions who think there's no life coming after, they have a lot at stake. It could cause stress.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Hinduism, for me, it seems like really well thought out, and it's so complicated, and just I've read a lot of books on it, and it's really hard to keep all the gods and goddesses straight and tell who it is by the statue. And so when you were there, I see you have these notes in front of you. So without what you're doing, teaching the older people who are Christian and not ready for the Jesus was a yogi thing, when you were going through this, what else have you found in your notes that maybe you haven't thought of for a while?
Yeah. So the most important aspect of yoga, well, it's debatable whether it's pranayama or meditation. It was remembering, again, the focus both on the cleansing the physical body, which is called shat karma. That's a technique that I really would have trouble practicing here in Indiana. It's just so advanced. And you have to, it would freak people out, is what I'm saying. The easiest, simplest one to understand is neti pot. You're supposed to use a whole neti pot in each nostril every single day. Reason being, the learning to breathe properly is so completely fundamental to yoga and life and being able to meditate. We spent days and days just talking about nostrils in my yoga class. So that was good to remember again. And we were expected to do the neti pot, and we were also expected to do the string, which is crazy. So it's been fun to go back and see these notes and re-dive back into this interesting level of yoga, and bring it back into my life. I enjoyed doing the neti pot every day. I really did. It was incredible.
Were you swallowing the gauze and that kind of stuff too?
No, we didn't get to that point. With the neti pot, it's not only to clear your nostrils, but it's also because it goes up through your forehead. It's supposed to cleanse your third eye. So that's another reason to do it every single day.
Before. I've read a lot of yoga books. I don't recall that.
Yeah. You can feel it. Yeah.
So can you explain that more? What did you have?
I'm not an advanced meditator. I'm just an appreciator of the possibility. But Third eye, it has to do with your pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. And when you're meditating, if you try to look at that spot between your forehead, you'll be led out of your consciousness easier. And our meditation teacher told us that she has a nephew who will be blindfolded. He's in Haridwar, and he gets a whole crowd around him to see him read books with his third eye.
I've seen that.
You have?
Yeah, I don't know about him, but yeah, there was, I think even some schools in England or something like that were teaching third eye stuff like that. So with the neti pot, were you doing it enough where you were getting those third eye experience also, or did you?
No, I think I was very, very beginning level, but it does improve your eyesight a little bit, and it really helps with the nostrils situation. Which what we did learn about the nostrils is that your right nostril controls your physical body, and your left nostril controls your mind. And throughout the day, one or the other nostril is going to be blocked. Have you studied this stuff too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you know.
But you can.
The right nostril, it controls your physical self, your digestion. If your right nostril's open, you'll be digesting more easily. And if both nostrils ever happen to be open, you're in a very high state of conscious. Most people's nostrils are never open at the same time. Doing the neti pot, practicing breathing techniques will get you there.
Yeah, they naturally switch every hour and a half or something like that, and something like that.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny with the medical systems. India always has a spiritual reason behind every medical aspect of the body, and the counterpoint to it in Western medicine is again just literal, specific. They would just say, okay, you have hay fever. Here's a spray. We need to get that blockage cleared. Let's do this. Yeah. In India, it's you're not connecting with yourself because you're not able to breathe. So first you need to meditate, and then maybe your nostril will open. Yeah. And so they have there's point counterpoint with both of the medical systems. They have a lot to learn from each other. I really think they do.
Yeah, I've read and watched a lot of videos on Ayurveda, and it's. I was actually planning to get certified in Ayurveda for a while, but I didn't end up going through with it. But there is something to just looking at it from a different way, and even if it's not maybe technically true, then there's still maybe something you can gain from it psychologically, or at least a different way of looking at it. I think a lot in metaphors. I can see a train track or a tree limbs grown together or something, and it's this instant download of a lot of information but you can kind of extrapolate these ideas. So if they're saying oh yeah, you're not breathing, well, yeah, you physically can't breathe, or your nostril is closed, but what about your life is maybe putting you under so much pressure that you can't breathe metaphorically or something. And maybe we should address that, because your nose getting clogged isn't as big of a deal as whatever this other thing is.
Yeah.
But then maybe there's more of a real connection too. So.
They really believe in all that stuff, and they have so many systems that I almost did feel like I was in a sort of medical school. We had to learn about the dosha system, the nadi system, the pranic body, the chakra system. All of them are very complex and have very so many terms within terms. Each term has another five sections, and it was really interesting.
How long ago was it that you were there?
3 years.
And you have a plan to go back?
Yeah, not a specific plan, but when I when I first came back from there, I was looking into schools there for my son. I was looking into property. I was like, I want to just be here. Then, like I said, I really just assimilated back into American culture. But yeah, I plan to go back. Maybe to get the 500-hour teacher training. Maybe just to bring my husband and hang out.
Yeah, have you, like, what do you think, I mean, I know you were talking about, like, you're wanting a really intensive thing, but, like, what other benefits of being in India do you see learning it than just a school in Indianapolis or something like that?
Well, the people who've taken classes here, they know they really impressed me with. They have learned the language. They've actually learned every proper term for every pose. It's a great education here. But being in India, you have the background of your teacher telling you that he's lived without food for a couple weeks, or like you have that the miracle thing in the air, and it brings that excitement to yoga that you wouldn't quite get here. I mean, it's just wonderful to read autobiography of a yogi in India. It's mind-blowing. So that's one thing about it. And I'd say also just the we took a meditation class, all the yoga classes, philosophy of yoga, yoga therapy, and a pranayama class. And so that's pretty extensive. And I don't know, just being in India, having a packed day, and learning from teachers who tell you, for example, our yoga philosophy class, our teacher is named Panda G, and he let us know that his aura is 8 feet. And it really was. He was always dressed in orange. He had a big body. He had a booming voice, a big head, and he captivated everyone. And it's true that he had a strong aura. Aura is not something I would have even believed in if I took it here. And I don't know how much they talk about it in teacher training here. When I was there, it became not only something I believed in, but just an obvious fact. And then I was excited about trying to learn how to strengthen my own aura.
Yeah, I've never been there, but it's one of the main places where I'd really like to go, just see what it's like. For some reason, I've always been kind of fascinated with it, and it's, just being around there, like the Himalayas, and like you read about these different teachers and miracles, and then like maybe you find out that like some of them that you thought were real, you find out they were just a fraud, and so there's like there's that too. But it's like overall, I mean, it just seems like it's been a destination for a lot of people seeking something more, like Ram Dass. If you're familiar with Ram Dass, he was, Harvard psychology professor in late 60s, and he's like supposed to get it. He's supposed to understand, and he's thinking, I don't get it. And then he goes there and he starts to get it. So and then he was able to have be able to articulate these ideas, kind of translate some of these Eastern ideas to the Westerner. Of course, he was like having, teaching the hippies and just be able to have, so he had the that Harvard education which he didn't think was enough, and then he goes there and found out, like this whole completely different way, and he's learning from a guy that just sits there with a towel around his waist, doesn't really do much of anything except sit there and teach people stuff now and then, but everybody's blown away by this guy, and he doesn't have the fancy car, the fancy title, the fancy anything. It's just, it's this guy's he just sits there, and then, and he's the one that gets it. So when you were in India, was there like any of it that like turned you off? When my this friend of mine that went, she was kind of traumatized by her India experience, and she was like worried because like she was being like kind of harassed by the men there, and this lady came up to her and asked her if she would buy her 3-year-old because like she didn't have any money. Like, here's a. So when you went, did you go by yourself? Because she went with a yoga group. And she was like staying somewhere, and she was like not sleeping very well, and had like a knife by her because she was worried she might get attacked or something. So it was like this traumatic experience, but it doesn't sound like your experience was like that. Did you have?
What city was she in?
I don't remember, but I know she went to the Beatles ashram, but I know she was there. But I think they went to other places too. Yeah. And I think she might have even decided to stay there and not go to like some other places, because some of the places that she went, she was like, it might have been the Beatles ashram where she went, like the group gets there and like, okay, there's trash all over the place. We're going to pick up this trash and we're going to clean this place up. And so they do that, and they start, people are walking by like, why are you picking trash up? And then, so they pick up all the trash, they go inside for a while, they come back out and it's covered with trash again. And I think she was just kind of, it just wasn't what she expected. So did you have anything like that, or was your experience like?
There was one teacher who was a little weird, and I won't name names or anything, but when people get on these spiritual trips, they're in a vulnerable state, and there's a lot of women taking these classes, and there's a lot of men all over the world who know that these vulnerable women would be kind of like an easy target for them to either manipulate in some way or, even worse. And so you got to be on your guard about that. I mean, with Rishikesh becoming almost it's not westernized, but it's comfortable for most Westerners because of, I guess, the amount of them that are there. It's got a couple hundred yoga schools, and not all of the people who are running those yoga schools are doing it for pure reasons. A lot of them are just seeing it as a great business opportunity, and they don't know much about yoga. So you have to be careful what school you pick. And then when you're in that spiritually vulnerable state, you also have to watch out for people who are going to try to cross boundaries because they're out there. So yeah, there was that. Yeah.
But it didn't sound like it was very...
It didn't happen to me. I just saw it happening to some people. So...
Yeah. And you went by yourself?
Yeah, but I went straight to the yoga school, and then we all lived together in school.
Okay. And so you didn't know anyone there? Mm-mm. Oh. So it was Indian teachers, but it was like mostly Western students?
Yeah, there were a lot of students from Europe, and... just 2 from America, 1 from South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So what is it that you're working on for yourself now? Like you were like kind of going through these and talking about kind of the way you've been practicing, and you said you were, I think it was before we started recording, but you were having like full classes. You were teaching out at your house. And then you stopped doing that, and and then start doing these other classes. So, like, what do you see as your next steps?
I think I got to get back into how I felt when I was in India. So I really thank you for having me on this podcast. I think my next step would be to keep studying these notes and to actually learn to meditate properly, to use the neti pot every day, and to once again start to reincorporate all those processes that I know for a fact make me happy and strengthen my core and help me be the best person I can be with my particular talents that God wants me to use. That's my next step.
That's some good steps. I see like several yoga books around. Like, what are some of your favorite ones? You mentioned Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh yeah. We got one here. It's orange. It's by Swami Satyananda Saraswati, and it's like the Bible of yoga, the textbook of yoga. This is what we were told by all of our teachers to get if you want to know everything that the truth about the processes of yoga, including the pranayama, the mudras, the shat karmas that are very complicated and you need to do with the assistance of a teacher. So this book, which is orange, and it says on the front asana, pranayama, mudra, and bandha. And again, it's by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. This is the best book. I recommend anyone get it who wants to go to the next level with their yoga.
Yeah, I've seen that one, but I don't think I've read that one. I'll have to see if the library has it.
Yeah.
So do you have other favorite ones, or you think that one pretty much covers the...
I'm wanting to learn. I've been watching all the documentaries about the various gurus. I watched Wild Wild Country. I watched Awake. I watched Breath of Gods. I watched a lot of Ram Dass lectures. I watched Krishna Das. But there's more, and there's older gurus. I was thinking it would be kind of cool to make like a set of playing cards that has their face on it, and then on the other side what they're known for, because sometimes it's hard to keep them all straight.
That's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, it'd be really fun. So yeah, I just want to continue to learn about some of those folks.
What did you think about Wild Wild Country?
Well, yeah. I heard you talking about it on your other podcast on this podcast with the other yoga teachers. It's it was. I thought it was a very fair documentary showing both sides and not exactly taking a side. They showed the faults of both sides, such as the very conservative town. Somebody in that town bombed a hotel that one of the Rishnishis was staying at. That was bad, and of course, all the things that the Rishnishis did, poisoning of the salad bar, an act of bioterrorism. I mean, that was crazy. It has nothing to do with yoga, but from the documentary, you could see how these emotions were elevated. And as far as Osho goes, or Bhagwan, I don't think that he's necessarily a fake guru just because he presided over that and just because he had 50 Rolls Royces and loved the diamond watch. Because I've read his stuff and he makes sense, and he introduced a dynamic meditation as a fundamental tenet of what he was teaching. Dynamic meditation. Have you heard about that?
Go ahead and explain it.
Well, if you saw it in the movie, they showed somebody made a film like surreptitiously filmed his students doing dynamic meditation and made a film that made it look like they were making sort of animal sounds, and they didn't have clothes on. Some of them were laughing hysterically. Some of them were crying. Some of them were screaming. They made it into a movie, and the very conservative townspeople who already had a lot against the Rishnishis saw this movie and, of course, used it as fodder against them. I mean, of course. It was just the light that they were painted in. And it did look nuts when you saw it in the movie. It looked nuts. But I think that it actually is not nuts, because I think we did a little of it in our training, particularly the laughter yoga and the sort of screaming into a pillow yoga. And it's all he was doing was trying to help people do the things that we're talking about, clarify emotions, get on to another level. And I thought it was kind of neat that he was here in America doing it. And it's a shame that it went the direction it did. You can't fault those conservative town people for being so afraid of them, particularly when their territory was literally being invaded. That'll get anybody angry. But it is a shame that there was such a misunderstanding between the two groups when there didn't necessarily have to be. I think it would benefit America a lot to have another guru like that come back here and do things the right way.
Yeah, I thought it was hard to tell, like, what did Osho really know about? So that, to me, they kept that in as part of the question, like, you could say, like, of course he knew that stuff was going on, because he was, Sheila, and if you haven't seen the movie, it's on Netflix, Wild Wild Country. Osho was this, guru, kind of like, almost like an anti-guru, and I remember when I was first reading about him, and I would see the books at the library, and I thought it was a Japanese thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I decided to open up the first book, finally got him because I was in that section of the library all the time, and I get it. I was like, oh, it's this guru guy, and the first thing I remember reading was when he was going to the university, he had the top of his shirt unbuttoned, exposing his chest, and the principal or somebody was saying, you have to button that up, and he's like, I'm not buttoning it up, my chest wants to breathe. It's like, that's ridiculous to suggest I button up my shirt. And I was like, this is cool. I like this. I get it. I understand this guy. And so then, the more I read about him, but it wasn't like I considered him my guru or anything like that. To me, I thought it was just kind of maybe you could still learn a lot from him. And then I remember reading when he was a real little kid, his grandma or his grandpa would have some other guru over. And, trying to talk about ending the cycles of birth and death, and, how, this life is just such a struggle. And so as this little kid, he's like, well, why don't you just kill yourself then? He's like, if this is just such a struggle, why not just... And so his grandpa didn't think that was funny, because he's insulting this, this guru. And his grandma thought, well, if the guru can't answer the questions of a little child, then he's not much of a guru. But I just thought it was... I just always thought he was really interesting, and I read several of his books and had no idea of what was going on out in Oregon.
Yeah.
So it really surprised me when I saw that. I didn't expect the documentary to go that way at all. Mm-hmm. But it was to me it was left as, is that how you saw it too? Did you see it as did you think he had no idea what was going on like that? Uh-huh. Or did you think he probably did know? like about the poisoning and about the killing the attempted murder of the doctor and this kind of stuff. He probably didn't know about that because the doctor was supposed to. But did you think that he knew about these?
Oh, that's a good question. You see, I didn't know at all who he was until I saw the documentary.
Oh,
okay. I tended to feel like on their side the whole time I was watching it, even when it got bad, which is weird, but it's possible that he may have known because of the things that he was telling Sheila to do, because of how savvy they were about the need to have their own property and the seriousness of their desire to expand their knowledge and spread their knowledge. It was a spiritual mission to them. So again, we were talking earlier about, do the ends justify the means? To them, the ends did start to justify the means, and that's when sort of the evil stuff can creep in. The actual, once you start thinking that way, you lose your mind, and you might actually, yes, attempt to murder someone or poison them. So, that's what happened. It was a shame. It was human. It was very human. It was human fallacy. But, so I can't totally blame either side because they both tried to kill each other. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it was really, really strange. It's you wonder how much of it may have been not true or something. Sometimes you see these documentaries and then, well, they didn't really present this correct or whatever, but they made themselves look really good because they were, all the homeless people and stuff. Like, if you're not homeless anymore, you can come stay with us. Well, you have to vote for us, but you can still come and stay with us, and we'll feed you and we'll do all this stuff. And they're like, that's a good deal, because why wouldn't we vote for you if you're the ones that are really helping us out and you let us live our lives? And then you find out that they're putting tranquilizers in their beer and that they're doing. Man, it's like they're so.
Because they were far gone at that point. They just wanted the power. They became power hungry because they felt that because they were practicing higher consciousness stuff, that if they could actually take over a town or even take over Oregon, that they could spread their message more efficiently. And that's where they went wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even with all of that, they're selling more books than ever, and and like I said, I had no idea. I mean, the library has 20 of his books or something like that. The Indianapolis Library, and it's.
So you're saying you think it's kind of bad to read his books now, knowing that he might have been murderous?
No, I think if you want to read them. I think that there's. It's almost like be careful who you trust.
Yeah.
And trust yourself first, your own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Because we might see this guy as, and not just him. I liked a lot of his books, and I don't really have a big critique of him. I mean, it was almost a parody of a guru or something like that, because you have some of the gurus and they have nothing, just sitting there in the grass, and all they have is a little towel around them. And then you have him with the 20 Rolls Royces and diamond watches and lots of very expensive things, and he doesn't hide that. He's showing people. It's like, why not? I like Rolls Royces. If people want to buy them for me, I'll take them, and they did. But I think just it's always good to just keep reading, and there's the other good documentary, Kamare. Have you seen that one? Kamare is I explained it on another podcast, But Kumare, his real name is Vikram Gandhi. He grew up in New Jersey, but he's Indian. His parents were from India, and so he was like, well, what does started like looking in like spiritual stuff, like talking to these like different gurus, and it's like they say different things. I mean, you ask one person what is yoga, they say one thing. You ask somebody else, they say something else. These different things. So he was like, well, if they can be a guru, maybe I can be a guru too. So he grew out his hair, grew out his beard, faked an Indian accent. He had, he was from New Jersey, had an American accent. And he decided to like go out western United States and like carrying like Shiva's staff. And, he had like an Indian friend, female friend, like setting up different workshops for him at different yoga studios and stuff. And like, they get to meet Kumare. And so he was just making stuff up. Like, you imagine like Warrior 2, where you're like in this, basically like a side lunge. Well, he was doing like this big Pete Townsend guitar thing. Like just winging his arm, looks like he's playing a big air guitar. And so he just made that up, and it's, you can say, well, it's actually, it is good for your shoulder mobility and stuff. But he was doing it to be funny and to prove the point of, he didn't really grow up that way. He wasn't really a guru. He was just an Indian guy with a beard and long hair, and he dressed like a guru. With the robe and everything. So, and he was completely faking it. He was faking meditations, and he never charged anybody that was coming to the workshops or anything. It was all free. I mean, I'm sure he's getting money from the documentary, but it wasn't, so it like started out as this kind of a joke, kind of, but then it kind of became something else, because he was like going up to people and like no, he's like, actually, I'm just like you. And he'd be like, everybody's, faking. Everybody has a mask. And he's like, I'm the biggest faker that I know. And he's like telling them right to their face that he's a faker. And they're just like looking at him like he's the greatest master, because he can just say that he's a faker. And so so it goes on, and then at the end he does he does the thing where he's going to unveil his true self. And so I won't spoil it, but basically he shaves, cuts his hair back to his, normal haircut that he had before, and he put on his like Western style clothes. And so when he taught these people a lot, he had this profound influence in these people's lives, but he did it by pretending he was somebody that he's not. And then so he kind of revealed himself as like, yeah, Kumare is really his ideal self, which he didn't even realize at first. But like some of the people, like once, you don't have a beard and you have short hair and you don't wear a robe, like just seeing him in that Western, like some people were just mad because he had like these yoga teachers like convinced and starting to implement his teachings. And that they felt, I mean, you could feel embarrassed and you would feel tricked. Like, you think this guy is something really special, and he's just this college guy doing this joke, kind of. And other people though clapped, and they loved it.
Huh?
They're like, that was great, and they appreciated what he did. And they could see it because he had like a hard time with this. He's like, man, how? Because he gets to really care about these people, and these people start talking about these very, very personal things, which I think he wasn't expecting at first. So this woman's talked to him. I don't know if I should divorce my husband. What do you think? And he's like, what do you do? I mean, he's faking this character, and this woman is coming up with him with this very serious thing, talking about divorcing her husband. So what should he say? Is he qualified to say anything? Because it was a really cool documentary, and it doesn't go, there's a lot that I left out, but I guess the point being, like you said, should you not read Osho's books? I was like, sure, read them. Yeah, see if you like them. But it's like, also kind of like, be careful before you like go all in, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, put all your, like, oh yes, this is my guru. Because then like there's some of them that come out and they end up being frauds. And so you put your...
Yeah. I still haven't gotten to the point where I could imagine following a guru. When I see people get all into it like that, I don't know. I called my art teacher my guru. I think that basically it's the equivalent of it here as a mentor. You can have, it's anyone who changes the path of your life. And I do kind of envy the relationship that they can have, the guru disciple thing, because it's beautiful and it's clearly very exciting and challenging. But I'm not looking for that myself. I'm just learning from the stories of it. And then what you were talking about, that could be a conceptual artist project. Like literally, I could picture people in the art world deciding that trying to trick someone into believing that you're a spiritual master would be an interesting experiment. But then you get into so many complex ideas, like where does the line stop between reality and fantasy and anyway, but it was, it sounds like it wasn't very nice of him in the end, but then maybe he learned something from it. Maybe he did actually become what he was pretending to be.
Yeah. He it wasn't like a mean thing that he did. It was like he was like trying to show them that they don't really need a guru.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I got you.
So, and he was telling them that, but it kind of became... He ended up becoming something that he wasn't expecting in these situations he wasn't expecting. And then like this big unveiling, but like you talk about like your art teachers, like a couple things came up like when you were talking about that. I was like, so when I was like doing like Kundalini yoga along with DVDs, and I'm thinking, man, this is just a joke. I mean, why do I have to have my arms up for so long? What does it have to do with chakras? Or Kundalini or anything besides my shoulder endurance? But there's like that getting through this physical discomfort so you can be in other situations in life and be able to be comfortable in other difficult situations or something somewhat abstract like that. But like with your art teachers, like they can prove it to you, right? Mm-hmm. So they can like give you a tip and you can immediately put it to use, and it's not like, oh, just trust me, just do this technique, just breathe like this, and then in 10 years you'll get it. It's like, no, here's a little trick. This looks really good. You're doing this well, but try this. I don't know anything about art, but maybe try this kind of brush instead, or try whatever. And it's like you can prove it. So it's like some of the yoga, I think, or the philosophies that what can you put directly into your life right now where it's like proven. So like a lot of the Hatha yoga stuff, it's like, yeah, you're building strength, endurance, you're building flexibility, your strength through range of motion. It's like you can kind of like prove the benefits. You don't have to have faith in it. Mm-hmm. But if you do it, then these other more esoteric concepts that maybe you like, I didn't believe that before, but now actually I can feel this energy. And so I think it's just good to like keep learning and never think that you have it all figured out. It's like the thing like with like not taking yourself too seriously, and also
you do have to have an open mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because it would be, what if you spent 30 years on some esoteric practice and it took you 30 years to figure out that didn't work? It's like I think like the the Buddha, Siddhartha, kind of like with the middle way, he was kind of proving that. He's like, all right, well, I guess to be spiritual, you have to starve yourself to death. So he's like eating a grain of rice a day, and that was it. And then he's like, yeah, that's not it. That doesn't make sense. And so I guess people just kind of have to figure out their own.
Well, that's again like literalness, literal thinking, which yoga kind of eradicates. Literal thinking is only good for the tip of the iceberg. You know, it's only one type of thinking. And you're right that the body leads you into the mind. If in my only experience is that when I was doing the 3 weeks of yoga, and I was doing yoga solid all day, every day, how differently my body started to feel and my mind. It was not a leap at all to imagine miracles happening, right? And so that's, or to imagine that everything they're saying was true. So that's it's straight through the body to the mind. And Yogananda said it's the spine. He said, God is in your spine. I mean, what a weird thing to say, and so intriguing. And if you just said that to a Westerner who thinks in a Western way and is very literal and is already religious in some other way, probably Christian, and actually imagines God being up, they're going to find it very hard to believe when they're thinking with their literal mind. But if they switch over and they think they have their own spirituality with Christ, they know that when they're praying, they're going inward. So then they can see that what he said, that God is in the spine, that your core, that going inward is the way. Then they can relate to that because of prayer. But it takes a breakdown of the literal and a faith in the body.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, have you read Yogananda's other stuff, like The Yoga of Jesus and those kind of books?
No.
Yeah, he has one that's called that, and you probably already get the idea from. It sounds like you already get it, but that was another book that he wrote. It's a lot shorter than Autobiography of a Yoga or Autobiography of a Yogi, so it may be a little bit more. It's a pretty quick read. But let's see, we're around in about an hour 20. That really goes fast.
Yeah.
I'm not in any hurry or anything, but is there something else in particular you wanted to get into? Is there?
Well, let me look at my notes. I mean, I think we really got into it. I hope I wasn't too repetitive, and the best thing to do would be to think of different, more concrete ways to describe all the stuff that I learned, but it's just so much knowledge. So
I don't think it was repetitive, and the stuff that did repeat is probably worth repeating.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain stuff that isn't concrete in concrete ways.
Exactly. That's what it is. It is hard to do that. But trying to do it is kind of interesting. So my advice would be, if you feel drawn to go to India, if this kind of stuff sounds like it's you, just try to do it. Buy a plane ticket. Once you're there, it's very cheap. So your major expense is going to be the plane ticket. And another little inspiration I had today that I could end on. It probably would start a whole nother conversation if we kept talking. But I was just thinking about all the violence in America right now. Particularly a lot of cities, you hear about it, Chicago, New Orleans, I know firsthand. We should do more mass meditations. We should pick up where Yogananda left off, and these other people, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, we could pick up where they left off. And people, I mean, here I am in Knightstown. It's a small town in Indiana. It's a very small town. And we have a wellness center called Be Still and Heal Wellness Center that teaches cranial sacral therapy. And that the focus of cranial sacral therapy is spinal fluid and chakras. This is far out stuff, and it has reached Knightstown, Indiana. So, yoga was brought to the West not that long ago, maybe the 1920s, and we've come so far since then that it's growing exponentially. So we should pick up where those people left off and start to try to use these principles in a wider and bigger way. And I would love to do a mass meditation in New Orleans. I know it would require a lot of organization, a lot of political contacts. You'd have to get a permit. You'd have to make sure everyone was safe. But imagine getting hundreds and hundreds of people from all walks of life, definitely the ones who are affected by the violence, all sitting and meditating together in the street. So it's a little different than a protest with signs where people get heated and angry. Instead, it's an actual going inward, a way to find an alternative to violence, an alternative to the drugs that cause the violence. We have so much to learn from Eastern philosophy still, and it's pretty cool that it's happening. It's becoming fast and furious. It's here. People are into it in all corners of America. So we're open to it. We're ready for it.
I think that's a really good idea. Yeah, I've seen some things on like Facebook where they have like a global meditation at like the same time. And I don't know how many people participate, but that does seem to be better than maybe protesting does something, I guess, but it seems like a lot of the protests end up being something that they didn't intend for it to be, so I think your idea is spot on. So I guess we can start wrapping it up. If you have anything to close on, you can do that. Anything more to close on besides what you just did? And how can people contact you for your classes?
I have a Facebook page called Everyone is a Yogi. So that would be Everyone is a Yogi /Facebook or other way around. And I also have a website called everyoneIsayogi.com. So both of those things have my contact information. I do it pretty loose here. I just call people back or email them. And I'm happy to teach anyone and everyone, and even free for the first class just to get you started. So if you're in Knightstown, if you're near Knightstown, if you're in Greenfield, if you're in Newcastle, find me.
Yeah, very good. Well, thanks for being on the show. It was good to see you. I can't believe it's been 20 years or whatever. So this is a really cool way to catch up. And find her on her Facebook page. And if you want to get a hold of me about training or about the show, you can do so at fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com. Thanks for doing the show.
Thanks for having me.